Hi folks, Rob Poyton here from the Innsmouth Book Club. Thanks for joining me on today's Innsmouth excursion. And yes, I know it's been a while. It's been quite a while actually, and it's just been a combination of being busy with various projects, and also the weather seems to be against me. Every time I planned an excursion out somewhere locally, the heavens opened. Anyway, the weather is much nicer today. And one other thing that has helped as well is I'm now the possessor, I was going to say proud possessor, but I don't know about that. I'm now the possessor of a senior rail card, can you believe it? Which means jumping on the train down to London is now pretty cheap. So my next few excursions are going to be set down here in London. And when we think of London as far as paranormal events go and paranormal sites, there's two that really spring to mind. One is the Tower of London, and the second is the place I'm visiting today, the British Museum. The British Museum was established in 1753, and initially it was built around the collection of Sir Hans Sloane. The collection was made public in 1759, and of course there was a huge expansion in items coming into the museum in later years and decades, largely down to the British Empire, the spread of the empire and colonisation. Now this leads us of course to the ongoing controversy where things like the Elgin marbles, there's still a dispute over who they belong to, should they be sent back and everything else. I'm not really going to touch on that today, other than to say of course a lot of the artefacts in here are the result of that colonialism. Not only artefacts here, but we have to recognise, of course, there was a lot of destruction in the name of colonialism as well, particularly in Africa and China. So the collection and the museum continued to expand, and in fact in the 1820s, when the major expansion took place, this was said to be the biggest building site in Europe. Presently, the museum houses around 13 million objects, and it gets something like 5.8 million visitors a year. The British Museum also used to include the Natural History Museum and the British Library, but of course they were separated out into their own buildings. I think the Natural History Museum was quite some time ago, and the British Library moved more recently. So of course, given the age of the building and the nature of many of the artefacts here, there have been numerous reports of paranormal activity, mostly from staff. So there's things that have even been caught on CCTV, like doors opening and closing, alarms being triggered, strange atmospheres, strange feelings, as well, of course, as you might expect, legends of curses, mummies that move, and all sorts of other odd goings on as well. So what I'm going to do today is just take a look at a very few of those items and talk about some of the reports surrounding them. Of course, in the couple of hours I've got, I can only hope to skim the surface, but I hope it whets your appetite to come and visit the museum. As you might expect from such a cultural landmark, the British Museum has made several appearances in literature, from Bram Stoker, The Duel of the Seven Stars, through to The Winged Ball by Dion Fortune, Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore, and many, many others beside. And we're going to start with what must be the most famous department in the museum, and one which itself has spawned many works of fiction, particularly mummy films, and that is of course the Egyptology department. I suppose this first came into prominence in the Victorian and then into the Edwardian era, with that great explosion in interest in ancient Egypt, and we can say archaeology or expeditions, or we can say looting, I guess. But whichever way you want to frame it, there was this huge upsurge of interest in Egyptology, and it is said that in fact the Egyptology department here served as a major inspiration for the founders of the Golden Dawn. And legends of curses seemed to develop pretty quickly. One in particular was attached to a mummy case that was said to be of a high priestess of Amun Ra. and it is said that everyone who came into contact with this case or had some involvement with it or owned it suffered the consequences. In fact, there were around 13 deaths associated with this case, as well as numerous accidents. One particular story tells of a journalist who borrowed the case from its owner. She was doing an interview on him and wanted to study the case closely. As soon as the mummy case entered her home, her mother fell down the stairs and died as a result of her injuries. Her fiancé ended their engagement, her prize dogs went mad, and she herself became very ill. The owner got an expert in from the British Museum to look at the hieroglyphs. That poor man died. The owner also had some severe financial misfortunes at the time and lost most of his money, so the case ended up at the British Museum. And once there, this curse, it seems, was not lessened. There were numerous stories surrounding the case, so the British Museum actually put it away from public view. And after a while, they decided they'd get rid of it. They'd send it over to the New York Museum to be exhibited there. So they put it on a ship bound for New York, and that ship was, of course, the Titanic. There are also some stories surrounding another artefact from the same temple, the mummy of Katabet, also a high priestess of Amun-Ra. And we are told that the head of the department here, Sir Ernest Wallace Budge, became quite worried by reports from his staff about the unexplained hammering noises and the sound of sobbing coming from the case containing the mummy, that very case of mummy we see here. There were various other rumours and stories attached to this case already, and people wondered whether the priestess was not quite satisfied with her position because she was in a display with various other cases, so she was placed in her own case as we see today, and since that time the mummy has been quiet. However, it is said that those who look long and hard enough at the prostrate figure will occasionally see the head move from side to side. Now, it was very busy on the day I visited, so I didn't have time to do that, but at a quieter time, perhaps one of you brave souls would like to give that a try. So from ancient Egypt we're moving on to Anglo-Saxon, and we're going to the Sutton Hoo Gallery, and there's been a lot of reports in this section of strange things happening with the doors. Sometimes a warder will try and open a door and it feels stuck, or as though someone is pushing it on the other side, and at other times the doors appear to open by themselves. So here's a report from one of the warders in the gallery. When we reviewed the CCTV back, you can see me and my colleague walk through, and then these doors, you just see them slowly open for no reason whatsoever. Of course people put this down to a breeze or something like that, but as the warder pointed out, well, where is a breeze going to come from in this enclosed space? And also, these are very big thick doors, you're going to need a bit more than a breeze to move them. And a report from another warder reads, between galleries 42 and 41 the doors were notoriously old and warped and difficult to shut. We got the one door closed, but it wouldn't quite meet the other, so my colleague slammed it and kept slamming it, and all of a sudden the door that was closed flung back open. He felt something push against his chest. Now he was a big lad, but he got knocked right back off of his feet and onto his backside, and then the doors slammed. Bang! So again, this has led to speculation by some investigators that for some reason the spirits of the artefacts, or whatever you want to call them, in this area are not happy with some aspect of the museum. Perhaps they just like having the doors open. Perhaps after being shut in a barrow for all those years, you want a bit of fresh air. And we're going to finish in the oldest room in the museum, actually. This is called the Enlightenment Room, and it was originally George III's library. So they've got some wonderful statues in here, including this one of Sekhmet, which I really liked, all surrounded by this amazing collection of books. And I'm sure if you have a bit of a poke around, there's got to be a Necronomicon in there somewhere, right? Speaking of which, according to Mr. Lovecraft, one of the translators of the Necronomicon was a certain Dr. John Dee. Yes, the famed Elizabethan scientist, mathematician, occultist, alchemist. A man with a very interesting life, and one which is far too long and detailed to go into here. And what we see here are some of the actual objects that Dee used during his occult workings. And a description given states, a number of Dr. Dee's materials came to the British Museum via the antiquary and collector Sir Robert Cotton, who acquired them after Dee's death. The large wax disc called the Seal of God is engraved with magical names and symbols. Dee used it as a support for his show stones, in which his medium allegedly saw visions of divine beings unveiling the secrets of the universe. The two smaller discs are said to have supported Dee's table of practice. The golden disc is engraved with the so-called Vision of the Four Castles. The black obsidian mirror, originally a Mexican Aztec cult object, was used for conjuring up spirits. Its fitted case has a label in the hand of Horace Walpole, the famous 18th century author and collector, who once owned it. So, a very interesting collection, and again, we could spend a lot of time on each of these, but I think I'll just finish with this quote. This is from the Book of English Magic by Cargom and Haygate, and this gives you something of the feeling you get when you look at these amazing items. If you stand in the British Museum today and half close your eyes as you gaze at the impressive wax seals and the shiny surface of Dee's obsidian mirror, perhaps for a moment you will be carried back in time until you see the old wizard in his study in Mortlake, kneeling in prayer before his scrying table, while Kelly gazes into the mirror. Candles splutter and burn, and slowly, out of the surrounding darkness, figures emerge into the candlelight. This time, not of angels or archangels, but of those who have been influenced by Dee. There is Sir Francis Bacon, Lord Chancellor. The poets Spenser and Sidney step forth from the shadows, as do Walsingham and Raleigh and other friends of Dee. Still more come, magicians Thomas Rudd and Baron Somers, Kelly, his old companion, reconciled to him at last, Elias Ashmole, who a century later interviewed Dee's grandson while preparing to write his biography. And here too are all the occultists who, in the 19th and 20th centuries, worked with Dee's Enochian system of magic. The founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Wynne Westcott and MacGregor Mathers, and the great beast, Aleister Crowley, who so admired Kelly. Then, as swiftly as they came, the figures disappear, and you find yourself once more standing beside the glass case in the museum. So there we go, there's just a few of the items at the British Museum, ones that have particular paranormal stories attached to them. Of course there are other stories, and of course there are thousands upon thousands of other items to look at as well. They've got a big exhibition of Japanese samurai armour up at the moment. Didn't get a chance to see that today because I'm on a bit of a schedule, but also I really, I came down at the busiest time of year. It's August, we're smack in the middle of the tourist season, and the place was absolutely packed and very hot. So maybe time your visit to a quieter time of year. Also, I was going to wrap up outside. I set my tripod up outside to record and was told you need a permit to film outside of the museum. So that's just a little thing to remember if you're planning on bringing your camera down. You can take pictures and film inside is fine as long as you're using a handheld, but you can't actually set up outside and film. Before I go, the other thing I just wanted to mention was if you're at the British Museum, then literally walk just round the corner and you will find the Atlantis bookshop. This is the oldest occult bookshop in the UK. It's been there for years. In fact, it was opened the same year as the Golden Dawn was founded. And I was chatting to the lady in there, and I mentioned I'd come down from Bedford, and she showed me the portrait they have in there of MacGregor Mathers, who I never knew attended Bedford School. How about that? So that's the Atlantis bookshop. Do pop in if you're in the area. They've got a ton of great stuff in there. And look what I managed to get hold of. Thomas Ligotti, Grim Scribe. It's quite difficult to get hold of Ligotti stuff, particularly some of the old works. So I'm really pleased to have got this. I know it's not cheerful reading, but Ligotti is a master craftsman, excellent writer. So looking forward to reading that. Speaking of reading, of course, if you're into weird fiction and all related areas, then do check out the Innsmouth Book Club podcast, and also check out our Strange Shadows podcast, which looks exclusively at the weird fiction of Clark Ashton Smith. Also check out our Innsmouth Literary Festival. Now for the second year running, we're back. We're in Bedford again. We're at the same venue, 28th of September. We've got Charles Stross as our guest of honour. We've got a ton of other authors and artists and creatives. We've got some gaming going on, we've got readings, and we've got Innsmouth After Dark with some live music as well. So that's shaping up to be another great event. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.